بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم نحمده ونصلي على رسوله الكريم أما بعد قال النبي صلى الله عليه وآله وسلم وقال الآخر اللهم كانت لي بنت عم كانت أحب الناس إلي وفي رواية كنت أحبها كأشد ما يحب الرجال النساء فأردتها على نفسها فامتنعت مني حتى لمت بها سنة من السنين فجاءتني فأعطيتها 20 و100 دينار على أن تخلي بيننا وبين نفسها ففعلت حتى إذا قدرت عليها وفي رواية فلما قعدت بين رجليها قالت اتق الله ولا تفض الخاتم إلا بحقه فانصرفت عنها وهي أحب الناس إلي وتركت الذهب الذي أعطيتها اللهم إن كنت فعلت ذلك ابتغاء وجهك فافرج عنا ما نحن فيه فانفرجت الصخرة غير أنهم لا يستطيعون الخروج منها إلى آخر الحديث أو كما قال عليه الصلاة والسلام. In the last dars, alhamdulillah, we were concluding the dua of the second individual, and the lesson we learned from the dua of the second person, one of them was about taqwa and the second was about haya and being modest. And haya and modesty is not just about women, it's also related to men as well. A few hadith we discussed last time about how a female, a woman should be careful in their dress code, in their speech. This also refers and is also applied to men as well. So when the men are wearing their clothes, they should also be careful that their clothings are not tight, they're not transparent and see-through, they're not representing others from other genders or other religions. They should be very careful in their speeches as well, and they should be careful in their walk. So they should have haya anil haqq, haya from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, haya anil khalq, haya from the creation, haya anil nafs, haya from themselves as well. And the last week we mentioned two du'as that we can learn from the hadith in order to be able to protect ourselves from this. Allahumma inni a'udhu bika min sharri sam'i, wa sharri basari, wa sharri lisani, wa sharri qalbi, wa sharri maniyyi. That, O Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, I seek protection in you from the evil of my ears, my hearing, from the evil of my eyes, from the evil of my sight, the evil from my tongue, from my speech, the evil from my heart, and the evil of my passion and sperm. And the other dua we learned from the story was Allahumma tahir qalbi, waghfir dhanbi, wa hassin farji. That, O Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, purify my heart and forgive my sins and protect my private parts. So these were the two du'as. Obviously there are other du'as as well that we can learn and practice and bring into our daily du'as as well. So these were the two du'as that we learned. Now moving on to the du'a of this third individual, Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, the hadith carries on. قال النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم وقال الثالث اللهم إني استأجرت أجراء فأعطيتهم أجرهم غير رجل واحد ترك الذي له وذهب فثمرت أجره حتى كثرت منه الأموال فجاءني بعد حين فقال يا عبد الله أدي إلي أجري فقلت له كل ما ترى من أجرك من الإبل والبقر والغنم والرقيق فقال يا عبد الله لا تستهزئ بي فقلت إني لا أستهزئ بك فأخذه كله فاستاقه فلم يترك منه شيئا اللهم فإن كنت فعلت ذلك ابتغاء وجهك فافرج عنا ما نحن فيه فانفرجت الصخرة فخرجوا يمشون. Now before that dua of the third individual, there's one more point that mentioned here, is that when the second individual, he mentions in his dua that I had the chance to fulfill my desires and she reminded me of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and said ittaqillah, that fear Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and do not break the seal. فانصرفت عنها وهي أحب الناس إلي وتركت الذهب الذي أعطيتها. Now what did he do here is that he stopped himself from committing this sin, from fulfilling his desires. And not only that, he did something better. The wealth that he was going to exchange for fulfilling his desires, he also gave that wealth away as well. So sometimes it happens that we are about to use some wealth for some sin. And we remind ourselves that, oh, that 10 pound or the 5 pound I was going to use for some subscription or to buy some and purchase some item. And a person clicks to my mind that no, that was wrong. I shouldn't be using that 10 pound to buy that item or to subscribe to this website. When that thought comes to his mind and immediately he stops himself, he also can give that 10-15 pound away in the path of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So this is what this individual did. Not only he stopped himself fulfilling the desires and committing this sin, he also gave the amount that he agreed with this cousin sister of his, he also gave that away as well. So this is something that we learn, that when we do stop ourselves from a sin, and whatever was going to be the cause of that sin, we also give that away and give that up as well from our life, so that we don't think of that sin again. So we completely separate ourselves from that item, or that whatever the cause was, we move ourselves away from the cause of the sin. So now in the third individual, he raises his hands and he makes dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now this third individual, he was like a manager. People used to work for him. So for example, at the end of the month, when it was time to collect the wages, collect the hard-earned money, so what happened was he was giving out the wages. However, there was one individual who left his wealth behind. He didn't take his amount and he didn't take his wage, and he went. With the amount that he left behind, and that was actually his, I invested. I bought some crops, for example, or I bought some land and I invested that amount. And this amount, after the investment, increased. كَثُرَتْ مِنْهُ الْأَمْوَالِ. And this increased and grew into more and large amount. After some while, he came and he said, O servant of Allah, give me my amount and give me the wage that I deserve and which is mine. So I said to him that, whatever you see in the land, in the field outside, whatever you see from the goats, from the cows, and all this flock and the servants, all that is yours. Take all of that. So now this person, he says to me that, he's trying to take the mick out of me. My amount and my wage was a couple of pounds, couple of dollars. So what are you talking about, taking all of this? So he said, look, I'm not taking the mick out of you, I'm not mocking you. Whatever you see from these animals and from these servants, they all belong to you. That when you left, I invested, and this is the barakah and the profit from the investment. So this all belongs to you. So now this individual, he took everything, he didn't leave anything behind, and he says to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that, oh Allah, if I did that amal only for your sake, remove us from this difficulty. So Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, he says that the rock slightly moved a bit more, and this time فَخَرَجُوا يَمْشُونَ, they were able to come out of the cave and they were able to leave and walk out of this cave. This is dua of the third individual. Now there are a couple of lessons that we can learn from this dua as well. One of the lessons that we learn is about amanat, having the quality of being trustworthy and al-amin. This is the one lesson that we learn. Regarding this, there are verses of the Quran, there are hadith of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, there are examples in the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam himself, in the prophets before, in the Sahabas, and in our ulama kiram as well. We see many examples. Now one of the verses that in Surah An-Nisa, ayat number 58, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he says that inna Allah ya'murukum an tu'addu al-amanati ila ahliha wa idha hakamtum bayna an-nasi an tahkumu bil 'adl inna Allah ni'ma ya'idhukum bihi inna Allah kana sami'an basira. The background of this verse is that in the time of Jahiliyyah, before Islam, people used to come to Makkatul Mukarramah, and in their own way they used to perform Hajj and they used to do ibadat near the Kaaba in their own way. Now when people from outside Makkatul Mukarramah would come, now those who were in Makkatul Mukarramah, they had duties. That if people come from outside, you had to serve this, you had to take care of these tasks, and you have to take care of these duties. So Hazrat Abbas radiallahu anhu was also one of those who used to take care of, Zamzam, making sure that Zamzam is available, water is available for everybody. So he was known as a siqaya. He had this responsibility. Like this, Abu Talib, the other uncle, also had other responsibilities as well. One of the responsibilities at that time was opening the door of the Kaaba. Opening the door of the Kaaba at a certain time. Uthman bin Talha, later on was known as radiallahu anhu. His family was in charge of the door of the Kaaba, the key of the Kaaba. So he says in a long narration that every Monday and Thursday in the time of Jahiliyyah before Islam, they would open the doors of Kaaba on Mondays and Thursdays. And there was permission given to go enter the Kaaba. So once Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam also came with his companions and he ordered that, can you open the door of Kaaba? Uthman bin Talha radiallahu anhu at that time he hadn't accepted Islam. He hadn't accepted Islam. So first he refused opening the door for Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam. However, Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam, even though he was very harsh and aggressive to Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he stayed calm. He didn't say anything. However, he did say to Uthman bin Talha radiallahu anhu that a time is going to come where this door of the Kaaba, the key will be in my hand. And at that time, I will be in charge. I will allow whoever I want to in and out. So at that time, a day is going to come. Uthman bin Talha radiallahu anhu, he says that after that day, I thought to myself that yes, if he has said this, a time is going to come. A time will come that where he will have the key of the Kaaba and the Baytullah in his hand and he will be in charge. At the time of Fath Makkah, the conquest of Makkah, Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he called for me and he asked me that where's that key? I tried to run away. Hazrat Ali radiallahu anhu, he got hold of me and he managed to take the key of me and hand it over to Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam went into the Kaaba, performed salah and he came out. Umar bin Khattab radiallahu anhu says that when Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam came out of the Kaaba, there's obviously cutting the story short, there was many things that took place at that time. So one of the things he says, Umar bin Khattab radiallahu anhu said that Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam came out of the Kaaba and he was reciting this verse, Inna Allah ya'murukum an tu'addu al-amanati ila ahliha. Where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he is commanding that the amanat and the trust should be returned to those who deserve it and those who are the ahl of it. So after he came out reciting this verse, Hazrat Umar bin Khattab radiallahu anhu says that it seems like this was the first time we heard this verse and it was revealed inside the Kaaba. Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam came out and he called for Uthman bin Talha radiallahu anhu and he handed over the key back to Uthman radiallahu anhu. At that time, even though Abbas radiallahu anhu was present, he already had other duties. Abu Talib and Ali radiallahu anhu, all of them were present at that time, who were obviously the great Sahabas. But Prophet ﷺ didn't do that. He returned the door of this, the key of the door of the Kaaba back to Uthman bin Talha radiallahu anhu. And from then he says to Nabi ﷺ said to him that this will remain in your family. So till the day of judgment, this is the prophecy of the Prophet ﷺ, is still now in the family of Uthman bin Talha radiallahu anhu, and he will continue to remain in the family of Uthman bin Talha radiallahu anhu. So this is trust. Prophet ﷺ was trusted with something. The command of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala came and he returned back to Hazrat Uthman bin Talha radiallahu anhu, even though Prophet ﷺ had the authority to give it back to whoever wanted. Whoever he wanted, you could have given it back to whoever he wanted. So this is the one verse of the Quran. Now if you look in the life of the Prophet ﷺ, even before prophethood, he was given two main titles that we all aware of, As-Sadiq al-Amin. He was known to be the truthful and the most trustworthy. Most trustworthy. And his very young age, when they were refurbishing the Kaaba, there was a dispute between the tribes that who should place this black stone onto the wall again, on the building of the Kaaba again. So they did a mashwara that whoever comes the next day in the morning, first we will make him the decider and he will decide. And everybody saw the next day when Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam who entered the compound of the Kaaba first. So everybody was happy, yes, he will decide and he will make the correct decision. So Prophet ﷺ, he said that lay out the cloth and he placed the stone in the middle and he made the tribes hold from the corners of the cloth and they all lifted the cloth and he placed the stone back into the Kaaba. So this was the trust the people had at that time. Even though after Nabi ﷺ, he called the people towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala after his prophethood, the people who didn't believe in him, even though he didn't believe in his message, they still trusted him, that they would keep their possessions with Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam would take care of their possession and he would return it to the correct owner. Hazrat Ali bin Talib radiallahu anhu, he says that when it was the time of migration, Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he made me rest in his bed and he told me that after I have left in the morning tomorrow, these items here belong to this person, this person, this person, this person. even though they were non-believers, he said, make sure that these items are returned back to the correct owners. That Ali radiallahu anhu said that this was the amanat and how trustworthy Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam was. Now when he is talking about trust and amanat, generally in our mind it comes to the meaning of wealth. So when he talk about amanat and being trust, Mufti Taqi Uthman Damat Barakatum in one of his khutbat, he says that first of all, what is amanat? What is being trustworthy and what is this trust? He says that somebody, he hands over an item of his to the second person and he has barosa and full trust on him that this second person, whatever I have given, he will take care of it. He will be one of those who will be rightful. He will look after it, and if whenever I want it back, he will return it back to me in the exact way that I have given it to him. In the exact way I have given it to him. Now generally this in our mind comes to wealth. That I have given, for example, a certain amount of money for him to take care of, or I have given his, an item of mine, I've given my car to him. So when I want it back, he will return it back to me. So now when somebody does give you an amanat, give you a trust, it is your responsibility according to your capacity, according to your ability to look after that item and return it back to that individual whenever he comes and asks for it. Now, generally it comes to our mind is about only wealth. But in Ma'arif al-Quran, there's a explanation that amanat and trust is not only about wealth. There are many categories and types of amanat. One of them is in a gathering. Sometimes we sit down together, we have a gathering, we discuss something. When the gathering is completed and is finished, whatever has been discussed should stay in that gathering. Especially when there is something which is important, private and confidential. So if there's 3 individuals, for example, or 5 individuals sat together and they had a discussion about something, whatever was discussed in that gathering should remain within those individuals in that gathering only. They shouldn't leak anything out. They shouldn't expose. They shouldn't tell anybody else out of that gathering, especially when it's something private and confidential. Yes, there are certain rules that if it needs to be told, then it's different. But when the discussion that took place, when there's nothing to be discussed to anybody else, they should remain within those individuals. Now, if one of them leaked something, we told some points, whatever was discussed to somebody else, that's betraying the trust. That's doing khiyanat. And in the hadith, Prophet ﷺ, he gives signs of a hypocrite. There's certain signs, 3 signs in one hadith. He mentions that there are 3 signs of being a hypocrite. One of them is that a person is being trusted with something and he betrays that trust. Whatever was discussed in that gathering should remain in that gathering. So al-majalis bil amana, something should be discussed, whatever is discussed remain in that gathering. So that's another type of trust and amanat. Number 2 is that somebody comes to you for a mashwara. Somebody comes to you for a mashwara. Even this, Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he said that when a person has come to you for mashwara, you should be honest and trustworthy. Put yourself in the other person's shoes and position and think that how would I want, or what sort of information would I want to receive from that person who I would ask. So if somebody comes to you for a mashwara, you should be very clear. You shouldn't hide, you shouldn't deceive, you shouldn't break that trust. So if somebody comes to you, for example, a mashwara about in relation to marriage, for example, whatever is true, whatever is clear, it should be mentioned. You shouldn't hide. You shouldn't hide anything, and this will fall into khiyanat. This will fall into betraying the trust. So these were the few types of amanat. One is about wealth that somebody has given to you, he's trusted you, you should look after that wealth, return that wealth in its correct and the way it was given to you. Number two was amanat and trustworthy in a gathering, that if something was discussed in a gathering, it should remain within those who were in that gathering. It shouldn't be leaked unless there are reasons. There's more discussion and more rulings on this as well. And number 3 we mentioned was about if somebody has come for mashwara, you should be honest and you should be trustworthy, you should be truthful in your mashwara as well. Put yourself in the other person's shoes and think that what sort of information and discussion and mashwara that you would want, in the same way that you should give the correct mashwara. You shouldn't deceive, you shouldn't lie, you shouldn't hide anything. And there are many other hadith as well. We look at the story of Musa alayhi salatu wasalam, when those 2 daughters came back to the father. They said that Musa alayhi salatu wasalam is strong. Al-Qawiyul Amin. Amin, that he's strong, he was able to lift the lid of the wealth on his, of the well on his own. And he's also an Amin, he's also trustworthy. When he was walking towards the house, he walked in front and they walked back. So even in this, he didn't lay his eyes on them, any of them too. So this is also a quality we find in the story and the life of Musa alayhi salatu wasalam. We'll conclude in that, inshallah, next one or two hadiths we mention, and also the lessons that we learn from this long hadith as well. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to give us the ability to have this quality in our life as well, that we are trustworthy, we are honest, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, even then in the Quran, when He describes those believers, He gives certain description and certain qualities of the believers in the Quran. وَالَّذِينَ هُمْ لِأَمَانَاتِهِمْ وَعَهْدِهِمْ رَاعُونَ. In the Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He mentions that these people are such that who are able to keep the promises and keep this trust that they have been given. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to give us those qualities which a believer should have in order to be able to be entered into Jannah. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to give us all the qualities, us and our family members and our progeny and children and the Muslim Ummah at all. Allahumma ameen. Subhanallah bihamdi, subhanakallahumma bihamdika, nashhadu an la ilaha illa anta, nastaghfiruka wa natubu ilayk. اللهم صل على محمد وعلى ال محمد وبارك وسلم. سبحان ربك رب العزة ما يصفون وسلام على المرسلين والحمد لله رب العالمين برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين.